Imagine having an expired transit card in your pocket, like it's been sitting there for 4 years with just a handful of cash still loaded on it.
Right. Just forgotten.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for you listening right now, that card is probably just garbage, right? Something you'd toss in a junk drawer and completely forget about.
Oh, absolutely.
But for the author of the diary we are opening today for this deep dive, that expired card represents this terrifying, monumental mountain they are trying to figure out how to climb.
The Maze Hurdle?
It is, and the mountain in question, it's literally just a 1-hour train ride to eat a meal and come back.
Which is wild because it immediately forces this total perspective shift for the listener. We are looking at a deeply personal, first-hand written account from Japan today.
Yeah, a real on-the-ground perspective.
Exactly. It's chronicling an individual's journey through life, through work, and especially through the complex administrative systems designed for people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And, the value of this specific source lies entirely in its unvarnished nature.
It's not sugar-coated at all.
Not even a little bit. Because when we try to understand a medical or a government support system, the default is to look at the literature they produce, right? Like the policy outlines or the medical journals.
Like the official PR.
Exactly. Those documents tell us how the system is engineered to function under ideal conditions. But this text, this gives us the actual friction of reality on the ground.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because the mission of our deep dive today is to really get into that messy, nonlinear reality. We want to explore what it actually means, both psychologically and practically, to accept a complex psychiatric and developmental diagnosis.
It's so much more complicated than just getting a piece of paper.
It really is. We are going to critically examine the gap between how these disability support systems are supposed to work versus how they actually function when an actual complicated human being steps through the door.
And this author is navigating an incredibly dense intersection of challenges.
Yeah, it's a lot all at once.
It is. We are looking at autism spectrum disorder, bipolar disorder, and a really long history of severe alcohol dependency.
Which is heavy.
Very heavy. And this intersectionality acts as a microcosm for much larger systemic issues. It highlights how systems designed around a hypothetical average user, if such a thing even exists, they just often break down completely when presented with compounding realities.
It's that universal struggle, Trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, only to discover the round hole is a bureaucracy that doesn't even have a category for square pegs.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Right. But okay, before we get to the system itself, the natural starting point for this journey is the deeply internal, honestly agonizing process of admitting you need to interact with it in the first place.
Yeah, that's step one.
The author outlines this 8-year period. 8 years of knowing about an underlying autism spectrum disorder diagnosis, but just completely refusing to accept it.
And what stands out to you about that 8-year gap?
I mean, it just sounds exhausting.
It is. Because biologically and psychologically, existing in a state of resistance for nearly a decade is going to extract a massive toll.
Yeah, you can't just fight yourself forever.
Exactly. The source maps out this cascading nature of mental health with profound clarity. The ASD is the foundational layer.
Right.
And because the author pushed it away and tried to navigate a neurotypical world without any accommodations, they generated immense internal friction. They were masking, suppressing their natural neurological responses, and just enduring constant sensory and social overload.
And when you are enduring that level of daily distress without a structured support system, the instinct is to find a way to numb it, right? You just want it to stop.
You do whatever you have to do to survive the day.
Yeah. And the text details how this unaccommodated friction led directly to over 10 years of severe alcohol dependency.
We really have to look at the mechanics of why that happens.
Yeah.
Alcohol acts as a central nervous system depressant. It enhances the effects of GABA, which is a neurotransmitter that promotes relaxation, while simultaneously inhibiting glutamate, which excites brain activity.
Okay, so it slows everything down.
Exactly. So for someone with ASD experiencing profound sensory overload or executive dysfunction, alcohol can temporarily feel like it is providing that missing executive function.
Oh, wow. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah, it dampens the overwhelming input. But it is a really dangerous temporary substitute. Over a decade of heavy use, the brain undergoes severe neuroplastic changes.
Which brings us to the next domino falling. The physical and psychological damage of that prolonged alcohol dependency ultimately triggers a secondary condition, bipolar disorder.
Yeah. the compounding effect.
By the time the author is finally ready to walk into their local city hall to ask for help, they aren't just dealing with the original ASD. They are presenting with a deeply compounded psychiatric profile born from years of untreated struggle.
It perfectly illustrates how untreated developmental issues breed entirely new psychiatric conditions. The brain is an interconnected ecosystem.
Right, you can't just separate them out.
Exactly. You cannot isolate the ASD from the alcohol dependency or the bipolar disorder. They have synthesized into a completely unique neurological reality.
And the culmination of this realization is the author deciding to acquire a psychiatric disability booklet known in Japan as the Shugai Shiteko.
Acquiring that booklet is a profound administrative threshold. It is the formal codification of their condition by the state.
It makes it official.
Yes, the local government is officially recognizing that this individual requires and is legally entitled to specific assistance.
And the assistance comes in various forms, right? The author notes choosing exemptions from the NHK public broadcasting fees alongside financial recharges for public transit fares.
Which are tangible benefits.
Yeah, and this brings us back to that detail from the beginning. The author writes that their booklet actually expired over 4 years ago. The public transit money loaded onto their card remains completely untouched.
Just sitting there in a drawer.
Exactly. And they're contemplating using it just to practice taking a 1-hour train ride to eat lunch.
Think about the mechanics of a 1-hour train ride through the lens of executive functioning and autistic burnout.
I mean, it's a lot of steps.
For a neurotypical individual, taking the train is largely an automatic process. You don't even think about it. But for someone in severe mental burnout, it is a multi-stage cognitive hurdle.
Right, you have to look up the schedule, find the right platform.
It requires spatial planning, sensory regulation, to handle the noise and crowds of a Japanese train station, managing the anxiety of unpredictable delays or interactions, and ensuring they have the energy reserves to return safely.
Which is huge. It is a literal manifestation of their world shrinking down to the absolute bare minimum required to survive.
It really is.
The money sitting there untouched for 4 years is a stark metric of how severe their psychiatric paralysis has been.
And yet, the very fact that they are contemplating the practice run indicates a shift. They are trying to carefully expand their world again, testing the boundaries of their current stamina.
But testing those boundaries brings up a massive complication. It's the psychological burden of invisible disabilities.
Ah, yes. This is a big one.
The text spends significant time discussing accessible parking spots at supermarkets. Legally, holders of the mental disability booklet are fully entitled to use these designated spots.
But the author describes an intense internal friction when attempting to use them, though.
Yeah, they feel guilty.
They do. They note that because they look able-bodied to a casual observer, they experience an overwhelming urge to punish themselves. They're fielding intrusive thoughts like, but I can walk. I shouldn't be taking this space.
Having an invisible disability and using an accessible parking spot feels like, well, it feels like having a legitimate VIP backstage pass, but constantly sweating that security is going to tackle you because you aren't wearing a tuxedo.
That's a great analogy.
You know, you have the paperwork in your pocket, the state has deemed you eligible, but you are constantly looking over your shoulder.
That internal monologue is the mechanism of internalized ableism. Society conditions people to expect disability to present with clear visual markers. A wheelchair, a cane, a physical difference.
Right. If they can't see it, they don't believe it.
Exactly. When a disability is neurological or psychiatric, the individual absorbs that societal skepticism. They're forced into a daily performance.
Which sounds exhausting.
It's incredibly draining. They must either perform wellness to blend into neurotypical spaces, suppressing their needs, or they feel pressured to perform illness to prove to onlookers that they genuinely deserve the accommodations they are legally using.
And the author pushes back against this hard. They explicitly urge readers who hold the booklet to use those parking spots confidently, to claim the space they are entitled to, regardless of what their own brain or strangers might imply.
Which is a powerful message.
It is. So they have the legal protection. You would think the friction stops there. But ironically, having the booklet is exactly what ushers them into a system that fundamentally misunderstands how their brain works.
Yeah, this is where things get really difficult. The Japanese government-backed programs called Employment Transition Support, or Shuro Aikushin, are designed to facilitate reintegration into the workforce.
That's the stated goal, anyway.
Right. But the author's experience with these facilities reveals a devastating mismatch between the architecture of the support system and the neurological reality of its users.
Let's look at their first attempt. They go to a large provider, and the program consists of a 3-month course focused strictly on basic physical stamina and manners training. 3 months.
Just on basic manners and
Yeah,
stamina.
yeah. The author describes it as agonizingly boring, overly crowded, and heavily reliant on forced group work. They found it so unbearable that they skipped 3 days immediately following their first day, were reprimanded for their absence, and promptly quit.
If a facility manager looks at that sequence of events, they likely categorize the user as uncooperative or resistant to basic expectations.
Oh, for sure. They probably just thought, this person doesn't want to work.
Exactly. But we have to look at the underlying biology of ADHD and ASD traits. When you force a brain with an underlying dopamine deficit into an environment stripped of stimulation, it isn't just boring in the colloquial sense.
It's painful.
It actively causes neurological distress.
Wait, I'm trying to model the perspective of someone designing these programs. If the ultimate goal is to place someone in a standard office environment, don't you have to build a baseline of routine?
That's the conventional wisdom, yes.
Like you have to show up, sit in a room, and be polite. Isn't the 3-month stamina course just a necessary, albeit unpleasant, stepping stone?
Well, it assumes that stamina is a universal, transferable resource that can be built up like a muscle through repetitive endurance.
But it's not.
Not for everyone. For neurodivergent brain, executive function is highly context-dependent. Forced understimulation drains their executive function rapidly.
So it's actually doing the opposite of building stamina.
Exactly. The crowded room introduces sensory overwhelm, and the lack of engaging tasks starves the brain of necessary neurotransmitters. The system is attempting to build stamina using a method that actively depletes the user's cognitive reserves. It is a total biological mismatch.
And that biological mismatch becomes incredibly apparent during their second attempt. The author switches to a smaller facility. The commute alone is a barrier, though.
Yeah, it's a 40-minute painful bicycle ride.
Right, which eventually necessitates their mother driving them. And the daily curriculum is fascinating in its rigidity. Radio calisthenics, processing wooden products, assembling and disassembling pachinko machine parts, sorting clips, typing practice.
We are looking at an environment optimized for creating compliant, uniform workers suited for repetitive mechanical labor.
Just drone work.
Pretty much. The tasks are highly atomized and require zero creative input.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Mixed in with sorting clips and processing wood, there was a task involving taking photos of boxed items to list on Mercari.
Mercari is huge in Japan.
It is. For anyone unfamiliar, Mercari is a massive e-commerce and flea market application, and the author happens to be a highly seasoned Mercari seller.
They actually know what they're doing.
Exactly. They possess years of practical market-tested experience in product photography and platform sales. So, recognizing a task they excel at, they offer their expertise to the facility staff.
The author attempts to transition from a passive recipient of care to an active contributor, utilizing a demonstrable skill.
Yeah, they step up, and the staff member's response to look at them and ask, do you pay taxes?
Wow, I know, right?
The response is suspicion, not utilization.
It's insulting. The author then has to pause and explain Japanese tax law to the staff, clarifying that selling personal household goods on a flea market app is considered waste disposal and does not incur tax liability, unlike a business selling acquired inventory.
They actually have to school the staff on tax code.
Yeah. But the outcome of this interaction, the author is kept entirely out of the photography group and sent back to sorting clips and processing wood. We really need to analyze the mechanics of that interaction.
Please do, because it makes me so mad.
The support facility is built on a strict hierarchy. You have the capable staff and the incapable user. When the author demonstrated advanced, specialized knowledge and then successfully defended that knowledge by citing tax code, they disrupted that hierarchy.
They stepped out of their lane.
Exactly. The system is not designed to nurture exceptional individual talent. It is designed to manage deficits. Faced with an expert user, the system didn't adapt to elevate them. It used a hostile inquiry about taxes to enforce the existing power dynamic, effectively putting the user back in their designated place.
The irony is profound. I mean, the author possesses a skill that the digital free market highly values. E-commerce is a massive sector.
Massive.
Yet the government-backed system designed to help them find employment completely ignores this modern skill in favor of assembling pachinko parts.
It makes no sense from an employment perspective.
None at all. And the impact on the author isn't just a mental frustration. They describe severe pre-arrival physical distress, stomach aches, nausea, the sensation of the world turning dark before they even get to the facility.
Those physical symptoms require closer examination. We often treat the mind and body as separate entities, especially in administrative
Like,
settings.
oh, it's just in your head.
Right. But nausea and stomach aches in this context are a sympathetic nervous system stress response. The body is reading the understimulating, rigid environment as a literal threat to its equilibrium.
So their body is screaming, get me out of here!
It is a biological rejection. The nausea isn't a psychosomatic excuse to avoid work. It is a measurable physiological reaction to an environment that is hostile to the user's neurological profile.
The environment itself is toxic to them, and that toxicity wasn't limited to the mind-numbing nature of the tasks. The author has an incredibly high sensitivity to tone, visual cues, and speech cadences.
Which is very common.
Yeah. Their intuition regarding the people running the facility reveals an even deeper layer of systemic failure.
We have to shift from the mechanics of the tasks to the sociology of the human element. The interaction between the support staff and the users is where the most profound dynamics of power and dignity play out.
The author notes a pervasive atmosphere where the facility staff treated users like babies, children, or objects. They write that the staff would use gentle words, but the underlying tone exuded heavy condescension.
This infantilization is a widely documented phenomenon in care settings.
Why do they do that?
Well, society frequently conflates psychiatric or developmental differences with a lack of chronological maturity.
Ah, so they assume disabled means childlike.
Precisely. The staff adopts a gentle tone, which ostensibly looks at care, but functionally strips the adult user of their autonomy and dignity. It reinforces the dynamic that the user is a dependent who needs to be managed, rather than an adult requiring specific accommodations.
And the author has a brilliant heuristic for navigating this. They call it the restaurant bathroom theory.
I love this theory.
It's so good. The logic is simple. Just as you can evaluate the true standards of a restaurant by checking the cleanliness of its bathroom, you can judge the true culture of an organization by observing the character of its leader.
Culture in any institution flows top-down. The manager sets the baseline for acceptable behavior.
Right. So following this theory, the author observes the facility manager. They notice the manager uses overly casual speech. The Japanese term is tamaguchi, with both the staff and the users.
Which is a big deal in Japan.
Yeah, in Japanese culture, language is heavily stratified by politeness levels. Using tamaguchi in a professional setting, especially toward vulnerable clients, is a significant breach of protocol.
It's very disrespectful.
Exactly. The author didn't read this casualness as friendly. They perceived it as a mask for a violent, aggressive, and dominating nature.
We have to look at how highly sensitive or neurodivergent individuals, particularly those with complex trauma histories, process environmental cues.
They pick up on things others miss.
They do. They often possess hypervigilance and incredibly fine-tuned pattern recognition for hidden threats or inauthenticity. A neurotypical observer might see a manager using informal language and think they're just trying to build a relaxed atmosphere.
Oh, he's just being cool.
Right. The author, however, recognizes the tamaguchi as a mechanism of establishing dominance. It is a way for the manager to signal that the users are beneath the threshold of formal respect.
Wow.
The author's intuition is identifying a power imbalance that threatens their psychological safety.
And this wasn't an isolated incident. The text mentions the author picking up a similarly bad vibe from a stylish young male occupational therapist at a hospital day service years prior.
It's a pattern.
It is. This pattern recognition feeds directly into a very dark suspicion the author harbors about the financial realities underpinning these facilities. They discuss a systemic rumor regarding these support centers functioning as subsidy farms.
The financial architecture of the disability support system in Japan creates specific economic incentives. We need to break down how the funding operates.
So, the text notes that facility owners receive approximately 180,000 yen per month from the government for every disabled user they take in. That is roughly $1,200 a month per person, just for having them enrolled.
Just for being on the roster.
Exactly. The facility then pays the users either absolute minimum wage or, in certain types of workshops known as Type B facilities, sub-minimum piece rate wages for the small tasks they complete.
Which is pennies, usually.
Yeah. The owners then pocket the remainder of that 180,000 yen for overhead and profit.
Analyze the incentive structure that math creates. If a business model relies on a fixed government subsidy per head, the operational goal shifts. It moves away from how effectively can we transition this individual into the open labor market,
Right.
and it becomes how long can we retain this individual to maintain our subsidy stream.
It suddenly makes perfect sense why they wouldn't want the author doing high-level Mercari sales.
Exactly.
Because if the author builds a successful e-commerce operation, they transition out of the facility and the owner loses 180,000 yen a month.
Precisely. If the primary objective is revenue generation through subsidies, the ideal user is someone who is compliant, capable of doing low-skill tasks that keep them occupied, but not empowered enough to leave.
That's horrifying.
The system, intentionally or not, financially rewards the warehousing of vulnerable individuals rather than their rehabilitation.
It is a staggering realization, and if anyone assumes the author is merely projecting cynicism onto the system, the text introduces the story of the author's sister.
This is such a crucial part of the account.
It really is. This narrative serves as the absolute emotional and factual anchor of the text, validating every suspicion the author has about the true nature of these managers.
The sister's experience illustrates the devastating psychological impact of these power dynamics when the mask finally slips.
So the sister is also navigating the disability system. She is on welfare and transitioning to a group home. Prior to the move, she attended one of these work facilities. The manager of her facility engaged in constant, overt praise. He would tell her directly, "You're so earnest. I don't even need to double-check your work. I trust you completely."
He is performing the role of the benevolent caregiver. He's creating a profound sense of psychological safety for someone who likely rarely experiences it in mainstream society.
And the sister believed him entirely. She reported back to her family that this manager was a wonderful, trustworthy person of high character.
She trusted him completely.
But after transitioning to the group home, she happens to overhear this exact same manager on the phone with another staff member. He is reviewing the work she submitted.
This is heartbreaking.
And she hears him say, "Is that all she can do? She's really useless."
That whiplash from conditional, excessive praise to sudden, absolute degradation is deeply traumatic.
The text details how hearing those words completely broke her spirit. She suffered such a severe mental health decline from that betrayal that she could no longer physically attend the facility and was forced to transition entirely to remote, home-based work.
The sister's story is a textbook example of systemic dehumanization hidden behind the performance of care.
Because he never actually cared about her.
No. The manager's public praise was a management tool to ensure compliance and steady work output. But his private conversation revealed his actual assessment of her worth.
Yeah.
He did not view her as a human being deserving of respect. He viewed her as a defective asset. The author's hypervigilant radar regarding the condescending, potentially violent nature of these managers was entirely accurate. The sisters just had to find out the hard way.
So the author is looking at this landscape. The open neurotypical job market is inaccessible due to their complex medical history, but the disability support market is predatory, commodifying, and actively traumatizing.
It's a terrible double bind.
They are standing at a terrifying fork in the road regarding their survival and their dignity.
When the institutional pathways fail, individuals in crisis seek alternative guidance, which leads the author to consult various third parties.
Right. They turn to an online self-help group. The consensus advice from this community is drastically different from the trajectory of the government facilities.
What do they tell them?
The group advises the author to leave their family home, get on public assistance known in Japan as seikatsu hogo, or welfare, and use that guaranteed space to slowly rebuild their life.
The online community is offering a strictly pragmatic solution. Seikatsu hogo removes the immediate crushing pressure of basic biological survival, theoretically providing the mental bandwidth necessary for psychiatric recovery.
It makes sense on paper, but then we get the perspective of the clinical world. The author had a counselor they were seeing for psychological support, and the text reveals a heartbreaking detail. The counselor explicitly drops the author as a patient.
Which is just devastating.
The counselor's stated reason is, "Your burden is too heavy for me to handle."
Unbelievable.
The parting advice from the mental health professional is to abandon the pursuit of psychological counseling and simply go get on welfare.
We really have to examine the systemic pressure on mental health professionals as well. A counselor admitting a patient is too heavy is a profound failure of the clinical safety net.
Yeah, where do you go if the experts say you're too much?
It points to a mental health infrastructure that is perhaps only equipped to handle mild situational distress and completely buckles under the weight of chronic, complex, intersecting conditions. The counselor is effectively offloading the patient from the medical system into the administrative welfare system.
So what does this all mean for the author? Both the peer support group and the clinical professional are pointing them toward the exact same door: welfare.
The logical consensus is clear.
Yet the author violently resists. They write that they recognize welfare offers financial and mental stability, but their pride and their human dignity will not allow them to accept it yet.
They can't bring themselves to do it.
No, they refuse to give up on themselves. They sense this massive disconnect between the logical best answer provided by others and what feels right for their own internal sense of self.
This raises a critical question about how society defines dignity. Why does the author equate accepting guaranteed government assistance with giving up on themselves?
It's a heavy question.
We are observing the deep conflict between external logic and internal identity. In highly industrialized capitalist societies, human worth is inextricably linked to economic productivity and self-sufficiency.
You are what you produce.
Exactly. The cultural messaging dictates that value is earned through labor. The author has internalized this metric. They fear that by stepping out of the economic machine and accepting welfare, they are permanently forfeiting their status as a valuable member of society.
This internal conflict is visualized in an incredibly complex emotional tableau involving the sister, the same sister who endured the betrayal and is now living in a group home on welfare.
Yes, the Starbucks bag.
The text describes how she visits the family home once a month to obtain a required signature permitting her to stay overnight at her boyfriend's house. And when she arrives at the family home, she is carrying a Starbucks paper bag.
The visual of the Starbucks bag is doing an immense amount of heavy lifting in this narrative.
Oh, absolutely. The author describes their reaction to seeing that bag as a crushing mix of envy, sadness, despair, and yet relief for their sister.
It's such a tangled web of emotions.
Because at this exact moment, the author is grinding away, working 16 hours a day at home, trying to build some kind of independent path, yielding absolutely zero results.
Just brutal effort with no payoff.
And they are looking at their sister, who has surrendered to the welfare system, and she appears to have achieved a stable, normalized life. She has a relationship, she goes on trips, and she has the disposable income to casually purchase a premium coffee.
We need to deconstruct what that Starbucks cup represents in this specific context. It is not just a beverage.
Right.
It is a universally recognized symbol of mainstream consumer normalcy. It signifies leisure, disposable income, and participation in the everyday neurotypical society that the author is desperately trying to claw their way into through sheer force of will.
And the sister, by accepting the Sakatsu Hogo, has bypassed the grueling 16-hour labor requirement and gained access to that normalcy.
Yes.
But the author feels trapped by the belief that this normalcy must be earned through agonizing struggle.
The tragedy of the tableau is the dissonance it highlights. The grueling, fruitless, 16-hour grind feels more dignified to the author than accepting the administrative help that would afford them the stability to simply breathe or buy a coffee.
It's so sad.
It is a stark observation on how cultural expectations regarding labor and independence can compel individuals to choose profound suffering over perceived failure.
The text doesn't offer a clean resolution to this specific dilemma. The author is still in the thick of the struggle, still grappling with the weight of that 16-hour day versus the Starbucks bag.
It's an ongoing journey.
But through this intense process of trial, error, and observation, they distill a crucial piece of advice for anyone else navigating these systems.
They arrive at a highly pragmatic reframing of the disability booklet itself.
The author concludes that acquiring the booklet does not mandate that you identify purely as a disabled person for the rest of your life.
It separates the administrative status from the core identity.
Yes. They emphasize that the booklet is merely a tool. You can deploy it when you require it to secure transit fare, to access financial exemptions, or to apply for jobs specifically within the disability quota system.
It's there if you need it.
But crucially, if you decide later that you want to attempt general employment again, you can simply hide the booklet. You are under no obligation to present it. It expands your options when you are suffering. It does not lock you in a cage.
That reframing is incredibly empowering. It strips the moral and societal weight off the diagnosis. It changes the booklet from a permanent marker of societal status into a utilitarian lever.
Just a lever you pull?
A lever the individual can pull to reduce friction in their life when necessary, while maintaining full autonomy over their narrative.
And the author closes their account by actively encouraging anyone struggling with undiagnosed pain or anyone resisting their reality to speak with a doctor and consider acquiring the booklet purely as a safety measure.
Because the objective is not to endure the maximum amount of pain unassisted. The objective is survival, and eventually finding an environment that accommodates your unique neurological architecture.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. We began by looking at the 8 years the author spent fighting to avoid the label of disabled. They endured a decade of compounded mental health crises just to avoid interacting with the system.
But the profound realization of their account is what occurred after they finally accepted the label. When they crossed the threshold and engaged with the support facilities, they discovered that the label itself wasn't the actual barrier.
Right.
The true barrier was the architecture of the systems supposedly built to help them.
If the structures our society designs for support the transition programs, the government subsidies, the facility managers require individuals to surrender their autonomy, endure systemic condescension, and suppress their unique skills just to receive basic aid.
We are forced to evaluate the true function of those structures. Are they genuinely designed as support systems to elevate individuals? Or do they function as containment systems built to manage and warehouse those who do not naturally fit the economic mold?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the structures around you, look for the mechanics beneath the unvarnished reality, and we'll see you next time.